All right. We see everyone coming in. Dr. Porter, is that you?
Yep, I'm here.
Yes, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Good, good, good to see you.
Good to be seen.
Yeah.
They say better to be seen than viewed, I guess is the term.
Oh, yeah. So we have a lot of people joining in now. This is going to be a fun talk. We're essentially getting into, you're doing some amazing stuff. We've done some work. How do these things connect?
Yes.
A lot of people saying, hey guys, how you doing?
Mhm.
Cool. All right, so we can dive in. Everyone seems to be joining in. So yeah, essentially as partners, we've seen each other's in various spaces and circuits, and we've always been trying to work and solve the same problem, which is
Mhm.
how do we get health into people's hands? Right? How do we prevent disease, reverse disease, as opposed to treat it and mask it? And this is where you've been doing some incredible work, and we've been in the background using your products as customers, you know, and experiencing them. And and there's some thinking around how between our two communities, for which they're both here today, how that
Mhm.
they can both benefit from sort of the combined science. So we'll chat on that today. We also have an announcement on our book, The DNA Way, that just came out, that everyone should know about for those of you that are just joining. There's an easier way to get access to science through that book. We try to make it as easy to access as possible. So take a look when you get a chance, The DNA Way. But we can get going.
Yes.
Cool. So, what we can discuss today is we we have things that we know in terms of personalization. Here's how the body works. Here's how you may, identify a red flag or something to prioritize. And then you have a solution.
Mhm.
So you've identified the solution. Here's what's going on. And by pairing these two things together, it becomes so powerful because now all of a sudden the solution can be personalized to your unique individual problem. So that's where I'm thinking, if you don't mind, we'll jump into some of what BrainTap does, and I can speak to how that connects to some of what we've learned on the science side, and why it benefits certain people, at least from our side, the experience that we've seen in clinic.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we can do that.
Sure. So let's jump in.
Mhm.
So the primarily, I mean, when we talk about BrainTap, we're talking about brain health, obviously, in general, but we're talking about meditative state, sleep, adjusting your mood. So how exactly does it do that?
Well, the main way that it does this is because of the different brainwaves trigger neurotransmitter production. So when you talk about gut brain health, you can't separate the two. So when you go through, like we just had a question actually that came up, how does it help with serotonin dysregulation? Well, most
Right,
people have this problem because they have inflammation and they
right,
have high degree of delta activity going on. When we measure the 30,000 brains that we have over the last 10 years, we found that 90% of the people we scan are over 60% delta, which means the serotonin is actually out of regulation. That should only, we call that a sleeping brain. So one of the things that BrainTap does, when you start the morning off with like an SMR, sensory motor rhythm, that's the one for cognition, that's going to actually trigger a little bit of dopamine and cortisol and norepinephrine. That's going to happen in the morning. And what's happening is the brain is dysregulated, meaning that it's producing so much serotonin that it becomes toxic. So that's when you think of SMR, it's between 9 and 11 hertz frequency. It's the bandwidth between beta, which is usually 12 and between 12 and 39 hertz. Somebody just asked that question. And then when you get into alpha, that we can break these out. Actually, there's like 16 different variations of brainwaves. We usually only talk about the 5, but I add in the 6th because SMR is so important for cognition, and people who are wanting to repair their brain from like a traumatic brain injury,
mm,
that's the one that actually, and when we talk about brainwave entrainment, think of it as tuning the brain for the right activity. There's no bad brain waves. There's only a dysregulated, which means when you're supposed to be sleeping, you start getting that awakened brain state. And when you're supposed to be awake, you get the sleeping brain state. So we want to just teach the brain that when it's awake, and when it's asleep, it's asleep.
So that's interesting because we see the same thing from the genetic side where the serotonin dysregulation, we can predict it through the 5-HTT-LPR gene. So the receptor can be shorter for some people. So the way they regulate serotonin and therefore their mood can be very appropriate for whatever the stimulus is, or it can look kind of like this. You know, some people might call it bipolar when it's not in fact a clinical bipolar, but just very hard to be relevant to whatever the stimulus is because the receptor shortens, serotonin is dysregulated, right?
Yes.
And then we also see that affecting people's sleep because in the later part of sleep where they're meant to sort of wait for sunlight as a stimulus to wake them up and bind that serotonin, their brain can't prioritize and understand what stimulus to focus on because the serotonin is dysregulated. And so they're constantly waking up, waking up, waking up. So a couple of sort of symptoms of the serotonin dysregulation: I'm irritable, everything bugs me, everything, I notice everything, all the details matter, and second part of my sleep doesn't get resolved properly. So for someone that has this dysregulation, the tool then, are we talking about now adjusting like literal serotonin levels or making up for that as sort of a gap fill, and well, how does it actually work?
Right. I think it's more of a, when we talk about a symphony of brain waves, when we're awake, we should have less than 10% of our brain active. We should always have little serotonin going on, during the
Yeah.
day, because all brain waves are necessary. But what happens when that gets so high, we don't have any dopamine, we don't have enough dopamine. And so we're looking for those hits. That's why we create stress. Like some people say that people are addicted to their stress. It's because the brain wants that dopamine to get out of that sluggish kind of serotonin feel, and we don't have any acetylcholine or any GABA going on. It seems like these brain waves all get, it's almost like delta becomes the controlling factor. And when you're awake, beta, there should be about 45% of your brain in beta and 30% in alpha. So you get a nice mix. Think of it almost like a 2-cycle engine. You need to have that mix of acetylcholine and dopamine, which gives you the ability to react and become intuitive at the same time. When those brain waves are when you're in that focused brain wave, if you have too much beta, then you become hyper vigilant. That becomes bad too. And if you have too much alpha, you have become attention deficit. So there's definitely and the nice thing is the brain, when it gets out of the stress that it's under, whether that's physiological or psychological. I think a lot of the problems we have today are actually physiological, that people are sitting too much. So the body doesn't know how to regulate, because our body's designed to move and breathe, not to sit all day long. So that is actually one of the things that we found, is that there was a study showing that when you sit for 3 hours, you lower oxygen to the brain 10%. So, I mean, when they say it's worse than smoking, that is worse than smoking, because it happens right now. So we need to really get up and move. So I think the biggest thing we're seeing as far as and we also know that movement changes DNA. We're changing our environment, because every 40 seconds, our DNA is changing those epigenetic factors so that the best you can show up, instead of the, if it thinks you're going to sit all day, then the brain and the nervous system starts to regulate toward that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the numbers, like about half of your nervous system is in your legs, constantly responding to what movement your legs are experiencing. That's why you see these centenarians from the blue zones. A common habit is that they are walking, and they're not just walking on flat surface or on a treadmill. They're walking on old roads that are kind of bumpy, where they have to adjust, and the signal between the leg to the brain keeps them sort of young and youthful, you know? And so we see on the genetic side, and I know that you're able to sort of help people get there if they're using the BrainTap. Like, let's mock up that, because we know you're not doing that.
Right.
And what we're able to see is that the innate neuroplasticity of someone's brain, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, this one gene, and how efficiently does the brain actually develop new pathways and new neurons, and how well do you learn new skills? And there's a major impact in terms of mood, behavior, depending on the genetics of BDNF. And yeah, like you said, your body's kind of responding and turning the dials through epigenetics. You have the bad version of BDNF. If you decide to go in the sauna, while it may change things, in fact, I'll tell you something there. The Finnish population, Finland, is known in general to have the worst BDNF, brain derived neurotropic factor, right? Just as a population, they're one of the worst. That, which means that they should have mood dysregulation, call it drama queen response.
Mhm.
Because things mean a lot and everything is a problem, right? Meanwhile, Finland is voted the happiest country in the world. So what's going on there? What's going on is they use sauna more per capita than any other country in the world. There's more saunas than people. And so the expression of this gene is being elevated, and all of a sudden they're experiencing as if they had the good version. And this is where, if you identify what's going wrong, then you know exactly what to use the BrainTap for. Right? If I know that my brain-derived neurotropic factor is off, and I don't necessarily relate my problems that I experience every day to that gene, but if I just focus on that thing that's not working, then something's going to get optimized. I might be surprised in what it is. It could be my mood, it could be my skills, it could be my ability to learn, but ultimately something's going to get optimized. So how does somebody then select, how to focus on what to work on?
Yeah, well, let's first go back because you said a lot there, and I want to just respond
sure.
to the first things you said. When we're walking and we're adjusting our brain, you said it keeps them youthful. That's
Yeah.
because walking really stimulates that SMR training. That's what our AM sessions mimic. Now, if you exercise and use the neuroplasticity, we actually have sessions on the BrainTap by Kathy Smith, who's an exercise physiologist, that are walking sessions that actually have the SMR brainwave while you're walking, because you could listen to that even while you're driving a car. It's not one that's going to put you into a deep trance state, but you can also use them in the morning to energize. We call them digital coffee. So what's happening is, if you find out, one of the ways you know you have a dysregulated brain is if you can't function without your coffee. Now, I know there's a big move in the biohacking field for coffee, and I love coffee myself, but it's not something you should do within the first 2 hours of waking up, because when you do, your body, and I'm sure we could even show that genetically, your body becomes dependent upon it. Your brain is very I wouldn't say lazy, but it's efficient with its energy. If you're going to do it for it, like if you're going to stimulate with synthetic like coffee and things like that, then the brain's going to go, you mean I don't have to gear up and get this SMR brainwave going? Because it takes energy. And I think the main thing people are missing today in our world is energy. How do we get energy into the system? Well, we're solar panels, right? We should be outside when the sun's out. I mean, that's the way these bodies were designed, but we're not. We're inside. Some people get out 2 to 3 hours a day, maybe even 4 hours. If you're fortunate enough, maybe you get out there for your whole job. But the reality is that in the process, if we're not getting that light from the sun, then our cells aren't getting the right encoding. So in the middle of the afternoon, when you start to feel that dip, that's because our bodies are designed at 2 o'clock to drop in temperature 2 degrees, because it's resetting. So think about it like a recycle. At night, they increase 2 degrees. Now, in the morning, if you find you need coffee, you need to start waking up and doing those AM sessions to get the brain can train itself. And what we find most people say is, I'm waking up before my alarm. What's going on? Well, your brain is designed to, you can give your brain direction and it can wake you up without the alarm. We learned that it's in Silva. And so when my dad was teaching us, I haven't used an alarm since I was a kid, so in the morning. Now in the afternoon, if you find you have a real slump in the afternoon and you find that you have to do sugar, like chocolate or tea or coffee, then I would recommend an afternoon session if you can. If not, then I would do it right when you leave work or when you get home from work, because you're going to get a reboot of the system. Our body is designed to take naps. So if we were really to look at the way our body is designed, we're designed to sleep 6 to maybe 7 hours. You don't need to sleep. In fact, most of the studies that show the long-term results of sleep are efficient sleep, not long time sleeping. Everybody says, I need 8 to 10 hours sleep. No, that's because you're a very inefficient sleeper. So if you're not getting the sleep you need, you're not waking up before your alarm, you need to go to sleep using our Sleep RX program, because we need to get you to deep delta faster. The first, usually there's 6 to 7 cycles of sleep, depending upon the person. I'm sure you have some genetic information about that.
Yeah.
Some people are, I was reading over, you just did a class on that actually a couple of weeks ago. In the process, when you think about how fast you get to delta, most people take 3 to 4 hours to get through their first cycle of sleep. If we can quicken that, like we do at BrainTap, when you listen to delta right before sleep, and even if you don't use the lights, you just use the audio sound, the faster you can get to delta the first time, the more cycles you get. Now, the more cycles you move through in sleep, the more you're detoxing the brain, because every time you reach level 4 sleep, that glial lymphomic system opens up. That's the trigger for deep sleep cycles. And so the efficient sleeper, like for instance, a few weeks ago, I was at an event and I showed my sleep score. I had an 87 sleep score with 4 hours of sleep.
Wow.
Because it was 3 hours of deep sleep in 1 hour of REM. I wouldn't recommend that. Usually you need 1 hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM, and you'll get a really good score. But I did that because I was flying between, I had to leave an event, and my plane got delayed, so I didn't get in till 2 o'clock, and I had to present at 8 in the morning. So, I wanted to measure myself, to show what jet lag does to the brain, especially late at night. And it's not pretty, but you can bring that all back, because once you get the brain back in sync with, that's a light signal the brain gets. Every cell has a light signaling system, usually through the, there's little, what they call chromophores, or little batteries on the cell that absorb the energy. And most people don't have energy. They don't have ATP. And especially if somebody's out there suffering from long COVID or something like that, or they have the flu, these are all things that basically throw wet leaves on the mitochondria. And the mitochondria, one way to bypass the digestion chain to get mitochondria to the brain is light. So we do that through light and sound and vibration to get the cells to light up. So I think the main thing is get energy in, and the brain is designed to heal itself. So, but if it doesn't have energy, it's like, how do you bake a cake without the ingredients? We need to get the ingredients in there, and what the brain needs more than anything is energy.
Now this time I have to unpack what you said, because there was so much there. And you're right. There's a lot of genetic insights in terms of the variability between all of what you said. So in terms of the circadian rhythm and the clock, this is a big one for people. There's literally a gene called clock, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know. So the clock gene will regulate, in combination with BDNF, what we talked about earlier, how efficient your internal clock actually works. So when it comes to I can't sleep, we can be a lot more specific on what problem to solve. Is it more like I can't fall asleep? Is it more that, like you said, there's these sleep cycles, they're like 3 hours-ish each, right? And you need 2 of them. And that's 6 hours. But it takes most of us 8 hours to get those 6 hours. We don't sleep for 8 hours. It takes us a long time because we're inefficient in our sleep. And so how do you get that efficiency up? It's not a need, but it's better to be there. And you have to solve the right problem. Is it a circadian rhythm problem? Well, genetically, what's going on with your clock gene? Genetically, what's going on with your BDNF gene? Is it a serotonin problem, right? And there's another big one, the serotonin we talked about already. A lot of people that in that first half of sleep, you're kind of recovering what happened the day before, right? So detox, hormones, all that stuff. If your glutathione and detox and phase 2 detox, like methylation pathways, are off, you can't keep up with today's toxic environment. And so you wake up sluggish, or you need a couple more hours, or you don't really efficiently get into that second half because you haven't finished the recovery. So there's different reasons why these problems get resolved. And then speaking to the mitochondria, again, you can get highly personalized, because this is an area where you have such high density of mitochondria in your brain. You'd know this better than me, but I think it's like the second highest density, right after the heart. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. So you have this massive density of mitochondria in your brain, and your energy is falling off a cliff because your mitochondria is being burdened with everything that you're dealing with every day, and you're aging, so your mitochondria is depleting. But some people do that a lot worse than others. The SOD2 pathway and the antioxidative pathway, and all of a sudden that has to be your priority, right? You may be solving the wrong problem. And then with using your tool, if I know that my SOD2 and my GPX genes are off, I know my mitochondria is not resilient and it's not ready for today's reality, right? Then I know that when I put my BrainTap on, I have to focus on this. because this is a specific area. This is my why, right? My why is my mitochondria is off. I don't make enough energy in my brain. And exactly what Patrick just described is what you're going to experience. And you may not know that that's what's going on, you know?
Right. And we're big believers at BrainTap. The number one thing is nutrition first. So you give them tips on what to do nutritionally, because you've got to bring it. One of the nutrition that we talk about all the time is light, though, because light is the most underprescribed nutrient that's
Yeah.
out there. So we need to do that. And I think that you'll know if you're sluggish, like someone asked what frequencies or wavelengths are better for cognitive function. We've been talking about that. The morning, you've got to start your morning off right. So if you can,
Yeah.
number one, do some exercise in the morning, some stretching, some kind of physical workout. I do a sauna every morning, when I'm home, because I have one here. And then I do my exercises, then I do my brain tap, because all of that's going to build neuroplasticity. Whether you're in the sauna, whether you're doing a physical workout, whether you're doing breath work, all of that is really changing your brain. Now, to get the most out of it, so I want to really point this out to people who are yoga people or Tai Chi, is that there are a lot of people out there that think that Tai Chi and yoga is just the physical movement. No, that's to get your brain ready for meditation. Both of those practices are designed to, now one is like Tai Chi is a slow moving movement kind of meditation. But if you want to get the most out of both of those, spend some time. When I was in India, they said the most powerful pose in yoga is the corpse pose.
Right.
So most people miss out on that. So think of when somebody's asking about neuroplasticity and what's the best brainwave, our brain is the way it is really because of a lot of exercise, right? We get up, we balance, like you said, all that. Mostly what our brain's doing all day long is keeping us balanced and helping us to look on the horizon. When you look at people as they age, what do? They start looking down, they start shuffling their feet, they're really missing out on that SMR brainwave because they don't have the balance. So that's why we have things like at the biohacking conference, I'm going to be introducing a balance board that we're working with a company on that does the physical training of the brain physically so that you can get that balance back, because nobody's practicing that anymore. Of course, when we were kids, we were doing all sorts of games, from hopscotch to running to dodgeball to all these things that are quick movements that are teaching us. And then as we get older, we forget to play. And so our brain loses, it's just like any other muscle, except it's the nervous system in the neurology. If we don't use them, those neurons will start to what they call neural pruning. So one of the things we can do is start doing things differently. I have 5 different things I do during Monday through Friday every morning. They're similar, but they're different, because you want to do something different so the brain doesn't start thinking, this is one of the best things you can do for your brain is just have a variety of things you do, conversations, things, books you read. I always I'll read a novel, then I'll read a self-help book, a novel, self-help book, because I want to get both the right and left brain involved. And it's always BrainTap is great and I use it every day, but it's only part of the solution. You've got to do even more than that. It's got to be a part of what you do, or something has to be there for you to do the neuroplastic change. And I think that when you can look at the DNA, like you said, I think it's a great way to look at it. And when we went through mine, it was right on. I mean, it was like you basically had a cookbook for me on what was happening in my physiology. And I think that as we turn on those cells, I don't know how that responds to the DNA testing, but I know that as our best, you give the options. This is the way it expressed poorly. This is the way it expressed positively. And I think that if we can start looking at it through the DNA lens, we start to understand the biological system of our body, and that it's really a code. It's really like our computer is walking around like a hard drive, and it's feeding back through the afferent nervous system, really, because we're getting a lot of feedback from our nervous system. They say that epigenetics, the coding that comes back to our brain, is actually like almost 100 times more than our nervous system information, because it's happening so quickly, and it's happening at the speed of light rather than the speed of thought, which is, when you're looking at it from the surface, it doesn't look that much different, but it's a lot different. We're talking about instantaneous changes every 40 seconds to every DNA strand in your body. And so when you know where you're starting from, we need to know a basis for that. So, I mean, you kind of have to experiment too, because even though I'm going to give some general guidelines, you got to see how it works for you, if each person
Yeah.
out there. And that's what I like about biohacking in general is, or health optimizing, however you want to look at that, is we have so many tools. I just
Yeah.
started to test a tool that's called the No Watch. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's
No.
a new device. I'll show it to you when we get to biohacking. It actually tracks my stress over time during the day.
Oh, wow.
And so you probably show people who don't handle stress so well, right? So that's one of the key factors. And if you're gaining weight and your body is like the insulin drip continues, if you're under stress constantly, um, my wife always says that I'm never stressed out, and the watch actually proves that. I was almost 98% calm the whole day, even though I had a few stressful events going on. But I've worked a long time doing that. But if you get stressed out, if you have these, I was driving with my grandson the other day on our little UTV out at my property, and I had 4 stressful events, while I was driving with him. He's only 10 years old and he likes to go fast, right? And so grandpa's sitting over there getting stressed out. Well, each of those 4 events caused a spike in cortisol,
Yeah.
and then which led to adrenaline, which led my liver to dump 25 grams of sugar into my system, just like eating a candy bar.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm stressed out all day long, that means the liver is no longer being used as a cleaner to the system. It's being used to produce sugar to fight off your stress. And
Yeah.
even though you're not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, now what happens is the insulin drip gets turned on, and it's like a faucet that you keep going in, and you see it dripping. So if you have that propensity, especially genetically, like some people say it runs in their family, but it's somebody once said it doesn't run in your family, it's because no one runs in your family. But that's not actually true, because some people just have a propensity to be more stressed, right? That's what you see. So I think if you could just kind of share with people how you find that out on DNA, because I think that's one
Yeah.
of the biggest factors right now in health, is that people don't understand that it's not always what you eat, but what's eating you and how your body processes that, because our body can produce all the sugar we need if we feed it the protein, fat, and fiber that's necessary as the building blocks.
Yeah, both of those things you said can be highly personalized. So both diet, nutrition, and insulin response, all of that above, and then stress. So you talked about stress first. So there's some people that can take on more, and there's some people that take on too much, meaning that the outcome can be different. Take me, for example. The way that I process reward and the things that normally would be stressful is I run towards them.
Mhm.
Right? My dopamine levels, genetically determined, are way down here. Like it's very hard for me to experience pleasure or reward because the actual receptors in my brain aren't dense enough. So least possible. Then there's a protein called COMP that clears these dopamine molecules out, and all of a sudden you go back to normal, which is where you're supposed to be. And mine is super fast, hyper fast. In between, there's also something called MAO, which works on that metabolic pathway, and mine is also fast, right?
Mhm.
So now, when you take that combination, feel it way down here, and it's gone before it started, I'm seeking reward. Whatever happened isn't good enough. So the outcome of that is I will drive myself to burnout,
Mhm.
right? And so as a therapeutic tool, I will keep doing it. It's very hard for me to be satisfied with the status quo. And so I'm sure if you were to measure my stress levels at any time, they're not healthy. I now understand this about myself, so I manage it. I schedule things and I make sure to shut off at certain points. I do what I need to do. But earlier on, I was really sick, which is where we got to where we are. I had 5 chronic conditions, and this was part of the root, is that I was taking on too much and burning myself out. The opposite is also true. If you have a very high dopamine expression, which you can determine with the DRD2 gene, and very slow clearance, there's a constant anxiety experience. Because instead of seeking reward, you're avoiding it because you're already satisfied, and everything causes it's this anxiousness about you. So we see people that are the naysayers, everything's a problem, right? As opposed to everything's an opportunity. And of course there's people in the middle, but there's 2 extremes. And with the dopamine pathway, we see more people on the extremes than we do on the middle. So it's like either everything's an opportunity, everything's a problem, and these are both sources of stress and issues. or you're in the middle, which we don't see that often.
Right. So people are more drawn, like in BrainTap, one of our most popular sessions is we have a series of sessions to avoid negativity or process negative thoughts.
Yeah,
And we know that people are addicted. There's books out there, Dopamine Nation, right? So the slow
yeah,
processes like you're talking about. Most people don't understand dopamine, know that in you're clearing it out fast enough, but most people, the dopamine doesn't give you any satisfaction at all. It's
right.
basically anticipatory. So you have to create that kind of satisfaction in yourself. So I think part of it is creating what's called long view thinking for these people that have that kind of negative response to stress, like you're talking about, that everything's
Yeah,
negative. And that's part of I think it's part of our DNA, because who survived? We all survived because our genetics got passed on. We didn't get eaten by that saber-toothed tiger, or
yeah,
we didn't get sacrificed on that block. So these genetics, I was just reading where it says that 20 generations could be feeding back into this life as memories inside of us, as genetic codes. Because when mom and
yes,
dad, when you were born, you had mom and dads and their mom and dads and their mom and dads. All of that's coming in as a code. And they now say that one little space of DNA can hold 70 terabytes of data. So
yeah,
we're just getting into this. I mean, you're in the forefront of some pretty incredible research that's happening out there, and what it's really doing with us or through us or around us. And I think if you understand that you're clearing out that dopamine, you're going to burnout. That's why it's so important that you do these sessions. Now, we had a question I want to show right now, because they're the same as you. Tanya had a question, and she's asking, she got the BrainTap 2 weeks ago, and she's starting to feel tired. Well, if you're like you are at first, you're used to running at 100 miles an hour, and
yeah.
now we're saying slow down, smell the roses, and you're saying I didn't even know there were roses. Because it's just a blur. So
Yeah,
now you're slowing down, and the brain's going, hey, I'm used to having this high degree of cortisol coursing through my veins, and the neuropinephrine and all these exciting neurotransmitters that are great if you're trying to get the job done. But
yeah,
then if when you we're disrupting that. It can take up to 6 weeks to regulate the system, because the system has to reformat. Really, think of it. Your nervous system right now, and we're talking about the brain, but really we're talking about the nervous system. And when you start to down regulate the nervous system, because you're one of these people that are, I would say it's almost like a hyper vigilant person, like that has PTSD, because they're always looking around trying
yeah,
to figure it out. And then you teach them there's nothing to be scared of. Well, for a while they're not going to believe that, because every day this is how they woke up, and they believe that that's the way they're supposed to operate, and it's not true. There are bad things that happen all the time, but you don't have to be looking out for them all the time. So there has to be that balance. So that's why like when we did the peak performance study, this is a good example. The 1%ers at Microsoft and Google, we did a study with Julia Arndt. She's a peak performance expert, and they would ask us because of burnout. These are people that would just work. They're trying to get a job done. And actually, if they don't have a deadline, they would pass out. And what we found out, number one, was they were highly depressed. We improved theirs we said, just do a 20-minute session in the middle of the afternoon when
mhm,
you're starting to feel low, instead of going to get your coffee or tea. And you can always have your coffee and tea after doing the BrainTap, but do the 20-minute session. And then what we found out was we increased their score. Their depression score went up 71%. These guys would have been clinically depressed. They didn't know it. They were peak performers. And the thing was that because they were burning themselves out. They were just going. They always
yeah,
wanted to finish the job. And there has to be that balance, but nobody's put any governors on these things.
yeah. And I've experienced that where so when you would take the dopamine profile I described,
Mhm.
and there's typically three potential outcomes. One is achievement, because you go down this reward route, like I need more, right? You become entrepreneurial, like I have. Or there's addiction, which is, well, it also feels pleasure, not just reward. So I'm going to do that more and more. My day becomes structured around this thing that I want, right? Or you're void of both of these and you end up depressed. right? Because the world sucks, nothing's good enough. And I have experienced all three of those, by the way. So
Right.
this dopamine pathway, and there's just one layer to it. We can speak to other layers. The context almost drives the outcome, right? And I think what we're able to do by using tools, whether it's BrainTap or other biohacking tools, is you can align yourself to the context you're in. We can't always choose where we work or who we're friends with and family with, right? And so there's pressures, and those pressures may not be aligned to your genetic capacity. So why not then bring in tools instead of just dealing with it, right? It's not you can do that, and we have those tools now. So you mentioned PTSD, same thing. The ADRA2B gene, I personally bind trauma a little more than the average person, right? So it speaks to, again, context based. It also speaks to a little bit of emotional intelligence. I kind of understand what people feel and I can relate to people. And the converse of that is I also experience things to a higher degree than other people. And so I use that as a filter. Now, if I didn't know that, I wouldn't know what the problem is. The outcome is I'm stressed or this is a problem. Very general feeling, hard to pinpoint what's driving it, right?
Mhm.
It also gets driven by BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor. When you're off there, it leads to this sort of a shell shock experience. The hamster wheel spinning, ruminating, can't stop thinking about it, right? Really, really good if you're trying to be a scientist in a lab with blinders on and just doing a really good job at something. Really, really bad when you're trying to work on a team, and everything for you means a 10 out of 10 when it may be a 2 out of 10. And it's very hard to be functional in that team. So for me, I got lucky there. My BDNF is great. So neuroplasticity is amazing. But it also means I don't give as much meaning. So when I walk into a room where people really care about some outcome of something, I'm like, it's okay, let's just move on. Big deal, right? It's hard for people to keep up with that. So I may create stress for others. But understanding this, we find that there isn't a genetic session that we go into people that doesn't become like either a marriage or family counseling session because everyone starts to understand how their brain is actually wired and who they are. And it's not just that person bothers me or I bother them. No, you're seeing the world differently. Your perspective is different. And this is awesome now, where it used to be here's who you are, good luck. Now it's here's who you are. We have tools to make adjustments. And now we have personalization. Here's exactly how your brain works. Here's the red flags for you. Here's the red flags for someone else. Here's the problems that could lead to. And by the way, here's a tool like BrainTap or any other tool. Plug it in and bring this suboptimal level to an optimal level. Focus on this, right? That's all we're saying. With genetics, you're able to prioritize. What's the job that my body doesn't do well,
Mhm.
right? And
Right.
here's the many problems that could come out of that job, many spokes out of this hub, right? If I know that job and I fix that, a lot of stuff is going to get better. Some that was intended, some that was completely unintentional, right? And I'm sure you see this over and over again with yourself too. People go into like, hey, I want to sleep better, but then everything else gets better too because they're fixing that central root cause, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I think what's nice about knowing in the DNA what is going on, what your low points is a lot of people always ask, what should I start with?
Yeah.
Well, once you know what to start with, you can always optimize your brain function. But once you know the liability, you might be working on an area, you might be exacerbating the problem by doing the wrong sessions. But the main thing is, if I think that people realize and they're really honest with themselves once they get the report back. Like when you talk to me, I mean, it rang true to me, and I said, we did that video. It's one of my podcast that we did where we talked about my
Right.
DNA and what was going on. And it was very true, So I think that if you can just kind of think it's not fixed, but you need to know what it is so you can observe it and then make adjustments, because some things are hardwired in, right? 80% of what we are can change just by your environment, but 20% is kind of hardwired, right?
Yeah.
Would you say? And so once you know the hardwiring, you have to work around that. Like you said, like when I'm a big picture guy like you, and I don't like getting into the deep minutia of things. That's why I have to hire people that are like that, and I have to distance myself from them, because if I can get bogged down, but I need them. I know in business, you need that person who can drill down.
Yeah.
So I know those are like two different kind of people. What do you see in the DNA that somebody listening today would kind of know if they fall into those categories?
Oh, very clear. We will go into a corporation and we'll map out an entire team. You know, who's supposed to be the accountant, who's supposed to actually be the CEO or the whatever, because of the way their brain works. You know, and if you start to do a job, let's say, in the context that you're aligned to, you thrive. It feels incredible. When you start to do a job that you're not aligned to, it feels like kryptonite. It feels horrible. And you start to use words like anxiety and depression and burnout and procrastination because you're not designed for that thing. So we do this all the time. We'll go into a corporation and see that here's, for example, here's a big one that comes over and over again. The high functioning anxiety of leadership. So the CEO who has a serotonin dysregulation, who is biting on every little detail that their team members can't see, right? They also have either a very high or a very low dopamine expression. So they became successful because they either chase reward or because they're naysayers and only focus on what they're good at. So they're on one extreme. You combine those two things where I'm either binging or I'm addicted, right? And combine that with seeing it at a high level of detail with serotonin dysregulation, it leads to this high functioning anxiety, which means I have this fire in my gut, this drive, everything matters. When the team says, here's 10 things, I'm like, what about this detail? What about that? And you also said this, and we were supposed to do this at 10 o'clock, right? That level of detail is not, call it conventional. That's extreme. How do you align those two? Because you have to be able to work with this team, and the team also has to be able to work with this person. So understanding perspective, step one, who am I? How do I see the world? And how does the world see me? And we work with so many teams where we have to say that here, this person is doing this job because this is what their brain's wired for. They're good at it. You're doing this job because you're good at this. You can't expect them to think like you, and you can't expect them to think like, they can't expect you to think like them, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do those very specific jobs. And you gave a perfect example. Here's a team around you, right? And that team is around you because that's the exact support that was needed. But the team wouldn't be there if you weren't there to build it in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. So we see that all the time, not only in the office, but also at home with parenting and certain children that need disciplining in a certain way, or need structure in a certain way, or need their meals in a certain way, truly how they actually metabolize food. So that personalization drives everything.
Let me answer a few questions. So we're getting a lot of questions.
Sure.
I guess a lot of people from the DNA group don't know what BrainTap is. So I'm just going to answer a few
Sure.
questions so they understand. It is an app that you can download, and I'm sure that you can share the link. We have a 14-day trial, so you can try that out, and you can start playing with. We have over 2,000 sessions. So like we're talking about here, if you find that you need a dopamine hit, then you might want to do those SMR trainings and get motivated. That's a morning session. Those are AM sessions. We also have the ones, if you're not getting enough sleep, deep sleep, then you can put on the earbuds even during the trial. And our study that we did in Australia with coal miners, we actually had a 71% improvement in sleep with just the app. So they took about 6 weeks. When they used the headset, because it's also a headset using light, sound, and vibration, the headset basically accelerates the results. They both get results, but the light gives more energy into the brain. So we're a headset and an app. You can try it out. There's a lot of videos out there to learn about it. What we were talking about today is how you can use the library of 2,000 sessions to work with your DNA report. Because one of the things we know is that you can turn on those switches. You can change 2,600 gene expressions just by your thoughts. So if we can change your thoughts, then we can change the way you express. So we're talking a little bit about that. And you can train the brain through your physiology. So whether you're doing physical exercise or doing brain fitness using BrainTap or a meditation or a breath work, these are all things you can do, because there's ways you can do this with breath work. You can, like we're saying, you can do this with red light therapy, lasers. You can do it with BrainTap. BrainTap just happens to be a very inexpensive way to do it. So, where you can do it at home on your own. And someone asked, is it like neurofeedback? It's way beyond neurofeedback. Neurofeedback gives you the capacity to look at your brain and train, but there's never been a study. And if anyone on here finds it, I'll give you $1,000. I've not been able to find it. There's no study that shows that neurofeedback does anything after the training. It's basically an experience. It's like going to a movie. It's a great movie. It's good, but you got to keep going back to the movie to get that experience. BrainTap, we've shown over and over again that once you train the brain using light, sound, and vibration and the algorithm that I've created for over 30 years, we've had like a concussion training that we did with every high school student in Gaylord, Michigan. We found the people that used BrainTap after a year a year later, we went back and measured those people in the study that did it with and without BrainTap. The people that used BrainTap had between 30 and 70% neurological improvement after a year. We have a dementia study that we helped every person in the study get off the dementia scale in 6 weeks. We went back 6 months later and they all had improved their neuroplasticity in 6 weeks. So the brain can learn. We're going to teach the brain the way the brain learns. Like your genetics, the reason that you're listening to us right now is because you are able to interpret the signals of light, sound, and vibration in your reality, like a tiger or a train or a cliff or whatever. You were able to read the signs of reality and stay alive, or your genetics were, I should say. You weren't there, but whoever your ancestors were able to pass on those genes to you, and you have superior genes than people that were alive, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So that's kind of just a little bit of a roundup so people understand a little bit, hopefully, of what BrainTap is.
Sure. And we can keep going with questions. I know we promised people we would do that. So I see a note here about autism. I can tell you from our perspective that, and this is really the reason I personally bring this up is because working with children is a really big deal to me. It's a big focus. The reason why we became a commercial company is because my niece actually had anxiety issues that we cured by understanding her genetic code. Instead of having her on a pill, it was actually just a hormone and vitamin D problem. And so with autism, we see it as two things. There's this innate condition, genetic condition, let's call it, a switch that's been turned on. Child has this problem. That's a tiny fraction of what we see today. The majority is a child was exposed to something that they weren't genetically aligned for, whether it's heavy metals, toxicity, EMF, some kind of toxic insult to the cells, which then leads to neural inflammation, and eventually there's behavioral development issues, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that understanding the pathways of detox, anti-inflammation, antioxidation, the key things that support cellular health, will first of all identify, let's use the word risk. How susceptible is this child to the outcome of all these toxic threats in our environment? And second, what to do about it? What system do I need to support? Is it the anti-inflammatory pathway? Is it the detox pathway? What's the thing that's going wrong? We've seen many, many hundreds of kids that we've worked on now that have gotten better, meaning this progression stops and sometimes reverses. Again, I'm speaking of the child who changed, who developed something, not the child that was born with a condition. That we don't deal with. We're waiting for one day a magic switch will be turned off when a genetic therapy exists, but it's not there yet. So let's see. Next question. Let's see.
Let me answer that too.
Sure.
In working with that too, we've done a lot of work with autism, and we find they're missing the alpha brainwave. That's the one. And so think of it as they don't have the capacity. Every brainwave, think of it like a Wi-Fi network, and it's turning on and off these switches. So if you don't have that Wi-Fi network online, or it's very low energy, it's not going to work as well. Like speech, we found in one of our studies we did with Joquita Handy in California, that once we trained the kids, it took about four weeks for most of them to get 23% of their brain in alpha. Remember, we want to have it about 30 to 35% to function properly. Right. But once we got it to 23%, 90% of those kids started speaking. She's a speech pathologist, so that was a big deal. So, when you think about nonverbal, and stress causes people not to remember things because their hippocampus isn't functioning correctly. So that's what's happening there. So you can, if you do the things like you're talking about, getting them to get the right nutritional supplementation and get the right vitamins and minerals and getting the right activities, then do the BrainTap with it, you're going to see an acceleration of results.
So there's a question here about dementia. I have some thoughts there, but what do you think?
Well, what we find with dementia, as we get older, unfortunately, that SMR brainwave starts to atrophy. And because of stress, when you think about stress, stress is a lot of dopamine and a lot of norepinephrine, a lot of cortisol. And what happens is the brain starts to think everything's a threat. So when you talked earlier about if you're the type of person that looks at life as a series of threats, you're going to be more prone to have this condition. If you're somebody who looks at life as a series of challenges and opportunities, you're going to find that your brain's not going to regulate that way. So just psychologically and physiologically, we find that people who are more active, that's why they say when you stay active, like walking when you're talking, and when you're walking, especially if somebody was saying they're 60 years old now and they need this much sleep or whatever, really move your arms and walk like you're on purpose. And what'll happen is that movement, there's a lot of physiological activity that's happening when you move your body, and walking can be one of the best ways to delay, if you will, these kind of conditions. But everyone on this call should remember that there's no wisdom, like when you look at ancient cultures, there's no wisdom of the youngsters. There's wisdoms of the elders, so the wisdom of the tribe was not kept with the young people, it was kept with the elders. So that means our brain was designed, if you will, to function until it doesn't anymore. I mean, we should have, I've known people that are so bright-eyed and young. When Wayne Dyer said, never let an old person inhabit your body, that's exactly what we're talking about, is let's keep ourselves functioning at a high level.
Yeah. Somebody's asking, I'm going to comment on dementia too. Somebody's asking about promo codes. We'll give you codes for both. So I know there was a BrainTap. You can actually use the same code, BrainTap, for both the BrainTap and the DNA test. And we'll put links in here for where you actually go. So now the next thought about dementia, the way we see it is there used to be this. So if you ask people about genetic testing, the number one thing that people that aren't familiar will say is, I don't want to know if I'm getting Alzheimer's, right? I just rather let it happen. I don't want to have anxiety for 30 years to know that this is coming. So that belief of you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's thinking is outdated in terms of what you can actually glean from DNA. What we're saying is that's step one. Okay, there's propensity, but what is the driver? What is the biological function that's failing? For example, today, so much of Alzheimer's is inhalation based because of how toxic our cities are. You're breathing in things that your body cannot detoxify, that's leading to neural inflammation and brain cell death, which leads to dementia, right? So if that's the GSTP1 gene, protects your lungs, there's a glutathione process, binds toxins, helps you clear. If you're not doing well there, that becomes a priority. For so many other people, it's their gut. Like me, I'm entirely missing the GSTM1 gene. I don't even have it. So my gut doesn't have a detox system, doesn't have a first line of defense. So if I'm eating the wrong foods and I'm going to drive gut dysbiosis, leaky gut, eventual leaky brain, that's my why for dementia. For some people, it's their ability to transport lipids, the cholesterol that your body uses to reduce inflammation, it also uses it in your brain. And this amyloid plaque that gets built up, there's one gene that determines how efficiently you move that stuff around your body. So if you're not doing well there, it's more the reaction is a problem as opposed to the causation. So we can be very specific so that there's an action plan as opposed to you got a risk of Alzheimer's, good luck, which is, not useful information. It's more like why and what do I do about it? And you name a chronic disease, genetic sort of insights have gotten to this level now, right?
Right. I think too, if you think about that, the recipe for dementia, being overweight and being unhealthy, is exactly what the news is telling us we should do. Eating all this bad food. I mean, the one thing you can do, if you're worried about Alzheimer's, if you can smell peanut butter, believe it or not, if you smell peanut butter, then you're fine. If you don't smell peanut butter, you're 5 to 10 years away from Alzheimer's. You can start doing, the nice thing is once you know, I'd rather know that I'm going to round the corner and there's an accident than not. And so once you keep your body, there's a lot of proof out there in brain health, the sooner you can take care of your brain and keep it peak, the better it is. I did a little thing they do for NFL quarterbacks, because I was doing a thing with just showing how the brain works and how they're looking at multiple things. And I was told, I'm 62 now, and they said, your brain, you did it better than most quarterbacks in the NFL. But I've been doing brain work since I was a kid. I grew up on brain machines. So you just got to keep using the brain. We don't have, quote, dementia in our family. So, but nobody did. When I was growing up, there wasn't any, what we're having right now is a lifestyle program, so if you're scared, eat the foods that are healthy for you in your brain. exercise, keep your body moving, and keep doing some kind of brain fitness, and you don't have to worry about those things. One thing is you can worry about them, but the worst thing that happens is you try to rebuild your house after a hurricane. It's better to fortify your house so when the hurricane comes, it doesn't bother you.
Yeah, yeah, for
That's the
sure.
key.
Yeah, that and that, I mean, goes back to this question Tony's asking. It makes me think the same thing. Tell me about social anxiety disorder. It's not, you got to stop thinking about it as just a disorder up here. It's also the way that Patrick just described, keep the house in order. It's not just the window or the door. You got to, the whole thing has got to be structured and maintained. If your gut is off, your brain's going to be off, right? And it's not just one thing, it's this inflammation. There's one word we got to get rid of. So what we're saying is BrainTap is a great tool to reduce the outcome and get you into the state where you want to be. How do I manage this way I feel? You also, like Patrick said, you have to do everything else too, right? You have this amazing tool, but don't just mask it, right? Although here, you can feel great, also work on the root, figure out what's going on, what's your why, right? Oh, and sorry, Linda, just to answer your question quickly, there's two genes in relation to the lipids, what we just talked about, ApoE, so APOE, that's, in terms of clear sign to dementia in terms of lipid transport, but there's things that can be done about it. That's step one. Then we look at 9p21. So 9p21 determines here's your artery, this tube, right? The inner lining is called the endothelium, which is where the blood actually touches and flows through. We can determine how robust that is, meaning how prone to inflammation. And that's a clear sign in terms of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, a lot of things. So it's between those two. There's a couple other nuances there also, but sorry, someone's asking me a direct question. How soon do we think AI will be able to interpret the DNA results? So our platform already has an AI tool in it. Just to answer Dinesh's question, it gives you reports, anxiety, keto diet, hormones, things that you understand. But we also built what we call the gene cast. So the gene cast reads to you the genetic side. Here's your gene, here's what version you have, and here's what it means, and it's personalized to you. So let's imagine you have this personalized podcast that's telling you about your DNA. It's very hard for us to do that for everyone, so we built an AI, and that AI is improving. We're already working on the next iteration, which is more interactive, where you can ask questions and dive into it. Somebody's asking you, Patrick, about tinnitus.
Well, we don't have specific sessions for tinnitus, but we have a good number of people telling us that their tinnitus is either lessened or goes away when the brain's balanced. I've not done a lot of research on that, but it seems like a lot of people are getting tinnitus nowadays. So I don't know what's happening out there. I don't know if there's any something going on that we don't know about, or that's the way the body is showing up with all these assaults, like you're saying, from EMF and all these other things that are happening.
That's what's going on, is all these chronic conditions that used to be rare, that were innate. I have this thing, is what we believe. I have this, right? Now everybody's developing all this stuff because the inflammatory load is so high and hardware is starting to fail. Now, what goes first? Is it your ears? Is it your joints? Is it your brain? We are all wired differently at the hardware level. What we can see is the system level. If you understand the genetics of each biological function, you know what's going to make you sick. What sickness? We don't know. It's a bit of a Russian roulette, but we do know that here's the job that your body doesn't do, and this is going to lead you to getting some form of chronic disease. Keep in mind that 14 of the top 15 killers in the US are all rooted in inflammation. So inflammation drives 14 of the 15 top killers. So if you deal with this one thing, you just don't know which one you're going to get. And now it's also tinnitus because, again, the toxic load, mostly from the environment, is so high. And just so everyone knows, number 15, which is actually number 3, is medical error. So it's just doctors making mistakes. Is the number 3 cause of death right now. So that's also rooted in inflammation, because you wouldn't have gone to the doctor if you weren't inflamed to begin with. So they're all the same. So somebody's asking, how can I pick programs in the BrainTap app based on my DNA results? That's exactly what we're talking about here today, which is the DNA will drive you understanding what your priority is, right? We're not saying what your problem is. We're saying biological function, what's your priority? Is it a neurochemical thing? Is it an inflammation thing? Is it a gut thing? Like, what is actually driving you to the way you feel, and what's preventing you from feeling the way you want to feel? Now that we prioritize that, you can very easily select the program on BrainTap to drive that. Is it a serotonin issue? Is it a dopamine issue? Is it a sleep issue? Like, what's the thing that's actually going to move the needle for you? Genetics will point you in the right direction. and the BrainTap as a tool will support and solve the problem. That's what we're saying.
Somebody was asking about pain too, and some people have a greater propensity for pain, and maybe you can talk about that. But what we did, we just finished 3 studies in Brazil. I just returned from there, and they've actually renamed their neurocenter BrainTap Neurocenter, because we beat out opioids in 3 studies for fibromyalgia. And
Wow.
their government agency called Invisa is the company that the group that paid for it. They paid $200,000 for 3 different pharmaceutical schools to do the study. So it wasn't done by BrainTap, it was done by their pharmaceutical department, and they tested everything. And I think that we could probably look at just like in the Suggestible You, where they say there are certain people that have a gene that they turn on and off, or that they know they're more susceptible to placebo than others. I can't remember the name of that gene. Maybe you know what it is. We didn't screen for that, obviously, because we didn't know. We didn't want it to be like the drug company does. They screen out for placebo positive, so that they know. But these were people that your brain, if you have too much, if you're dysregulated again, you'll have too much pain. Pain only happens in the beta brainwave. So if you have a lot of stress and anxiety and a lot of dopamine, like if you're one of those people that has that loves that driver, you can maybe have a propensity to have more pain than others. Myself, I went through painless surgery without any anesthetic, because my dad trained me to go to level and have surgery without anesthetic, because everybody can do that too. So it just depends. Our brain is the most powerful pharmacy. So anything that's driving, I always tell people, emotions drive behavior, but your physiology drives the emotion. So, when you think about when you look at somebody in the movies, they have to get their physiology right. They're not smiling and happy going, I'm depressed. Their shoulders are rolled forward and drooping.
Yeah, no, for sure. And when it comes to pain, the key area we look at is methylation, so the response to pain. And I know you eat well and you supplement well, so you're probably doing things right there already, right? So when it comes to this methylation cascade, people think of this MTHFR gene, which is spoken up a lot, but there's actually a full cascade. Think of it more as a chain, and each link in that chain needs to be looked at to understand where you're actually not doing well. So this is a process where your body's doing 3 things. It's constantly, the thing that Patrick keeps talking about, it's constantly managing your gene expression. So your methylation is turning the dials on your genes so that they're operating appropriate to whatever's going on. You're running, you're eating, you're crying, your genes have to give you what you need at that given time, right? Second thing is they're sending what's called a methyl group to make toxins water soluble so you can get rid of them. Third, the outcome of all that is it manages inflammation. So if your methylation is off, your inflammation is probably high. And there's very specific places where you can intervene. Do I need B12? And do I need a sublingual B12 under my tongue, or do I need to swallow it in my stomach? Do I need a methylcobalamin? Do I need adenosine? Your genes can make it that specific that if I got to this minutia of like, that's the specific version I need, I'm going to feel so much better by this one thing. Do I need folate, or do I need folinic acid? Some people take a B complex and it's actually over methylating them and they start to feel worse. And they don't realize, like, little headaches and skin issues, and you start to think that that's a condition. I have migraines. You may be over methylating yourself. So being specific, it goes back to the thing we keep saying. Here's the job my body doesn't do. I now know what to do about it, whether it is incorporating BrainTap, whether it is taking the right supplement, whether it is bringing in the right exercise for hormones or whatever it may be. So methylation is key when it comes to pain. I can tell you a quick little story. We had a patient who was in her, I believe, her 70s, who came to a third-party clinic in Niagara, which is very close to here in Toronto, where I am. And she just wanted to be optimal. She said, hey, I have some money to spend. I want to buy some supplements. Doctor, what do you think I should buy? The doctor said, you know what, use this genetic company. They're going to tell you what to buy. So it's personalized to you. She did that. She had been in a car accident where her arm was numb from the elbow to her fingertips. One arm was completely dysfunctional. And she was told it's damaged. Forget about it, right? Within 2 weeks of being on the supplement formula, she woke up in pain. And she called her doctor the next day saying, my arm's in pain. Is that a bad sign? She said, no, it's a great sign, because that means your nerves are doing something. 6 weeks later, she had full functionality of the arm again, which she didn't have for over a year. In fact, I think it was close to 2 years. Why? We weren't trying to treat the arm. We didn't even know she had this problem. All we were looking for was, again, what jobs did her body not do well? Her methylation was completely messed up. So we made a cocktail that supported that. And all this was neural inflammation. She had inflammation in the area where the damage was, and 2 years in, she still hadn't recovered. It wasn't damage per se, it was just inflammation. So the inflammation got unraveled in 6 weeks, full function of this arm, which she thought was dead. So that's just a simple example of solving things at the root cause level. Let's see what we have here next. Yeah, is there new, so somebody said, if I had my DNA done a while ago, is there new research? So that's really one cool thing about, for you on the consumer side about DNA, not the best for us. So genetic testing companies, test your DNA once and you're done. That's it, right? Because your DNA never changes. And that's why I should point out, a lot of companies become data selling companies because they need to figure out a way to make money. So we don't do that. We have a clinical side, right, that we built instead of selling data. But yes, you test your DNA, you go back to it a year from now, we've learned more, so you now know more. It's in your portal, it's there. We just keep updating it and you keep learning. Our clinicians also keep getting trained, and I keep learning every time I speak to somebody. So those insights keep building in. Your DNA is permanent, doesn't change, keeps going from there. Let's see. So
Somebody said, let me answer this one. How can BrainTap prevent dementia or Alzheimer's? You're not supposed to get dementia or Alzheimer's, so it doesn't prevent it. It's not like it's predetermined. You might have the propensity, like Kesef was saying, but it's not. You can eat right, live right. There are some people that have that propensity but never experience the result of it.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing it does is it's going to keep the brain active. If somebody is just coming home and all they do is sit on the couch, drink their 6-pack of beer and watch the news, and then the next day they get up and do the same thing, doing the same thing is the death kill to the brain. We need to do a variety of different activities. And I think that what BrainTap does mostly is regulate throughout the day. What we did with that study that I was talking about, where we took everyone off the dementia scale, was we trained them first thing in the morning to the SMR training. We need to speed up the brain in the morning, get the dopamine going. And then in the midday, we need a deep reboot. That's the theta training, the deep reboot to reset the circadian rhythm of the body. And then at night, we did this deep sleep program. And we did that for 21 days. And those people, we tested them. And the people that were regulating the way we wanted to, we told them they only had to do it once a day if they wanted to at that point. But every person in our study continued 3 times a day because they were getting such great results. The more you do this and train the brain for the right regulation during the day, the brain will learn to do it on its own. It doesn't do it for the brain, it's inviting the brain. Think of it like a trainer, but you get to take it home and put it on your head and do it. So it's not doing it for the brain, it's helping the brain do it for itself.
Right. And that, again, just to your point, as you're saying that, somebody in the box is saying, I'm 39 years old and I'm a trainer, I do everything right, but I'm seeing early signs of dementia. So it's exactly to your point that it's not, why at 39? That's not typical. There's a cause there, right? There's something that's being that's off. So all we're saying is we can identify genetically what that thing is. Like what is it? Is it your gut? Is it your lungs? Is it your detox pathways, anti-inflammatory? Is it plaque buildup? What is the thing that's driving it? Especially for someone like yourself, who's a trainer, who's doing supposedly everything right. Like, what's that red flag that you don't understand? We'll figure that out.
Yeah, we've also seen trainers. I mean, they look like they're physically should have no problems, but they're burning themselves out.
Yeah,
we're talking right now because TB12, Tom Brady's group, we're going to be doing a TB12 powered by BrainTap because we showed the power of recovery, and he's all about recovery. So most trainers, just like yoga, when I was talking about that earlier, after a workout, when I did a thing for Ironman magazine, and I showed the mind-muscle connection. Acetylcholine builds more muscle. So if you're more relaxed, you probably can show in DNA those people that can build more muscle, right? So some people can't build muscle no matter what they do. They're at the gym, and a lot of times it's because they have too much cortisol. You've got to relax and build that muscle. You can't, the muscle won't build under stress. So we've got to, once you've done the stressful workout, you've got to relax. And when you're working out, don't get so stressed out. Take time to recover between reps, and you'll find that your body, think of it like this, you only have so much in your bank account every day. And if you use that up in your workout for an hour, or if you're working out for more than an hour and you're really working hard, your body doesn't, you don't have to work that hard. They've proven that. I mean, like resistance bands are proving that, where you can work out in 20 minutes and build muscle. You don't have to go to the gym for 4 hours like Arnold Schwarzenegger or something like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so several people have asked about where they go to buy. We're going to continue, but just so that you know, I dropped here in the chat the DNAcompany.com/BrainTap. So don't go directly to the website and buy. Don't pay retail. You'll get a discount here. So go to the DNAcompany.com/BrainTap for 15% off. And Neil had dropped into the chat earlier the DNAcompany.com, the DNA Way, which is the book. So if anyone's interested in looking at the book, if you just want to learn more, it's there. And Patrick, I think you had dropped in something around. And by the way, we'll send everybody these when you'll expect an email, a replay.
If people are liking what they're hearing here, you and I are doing that. We're doing a 4-hour how to think faster and smarter in 4 hours.
Yeah.
And there's still, I'm pretty sure there's still some seats available in that. They were telling me it's close to being sold out, but if you want to come for a whole day, 4 hours with us, I'm doing 2 hours and you're doing 2 hours. So it's going to be an incredible day. And I think it's going to be pretty powerful and I'm going to show people how to use, we're not going to be using BrainTap during the whole time. I'm going to be showing you all the things that I've learned over the years. I've done a lot more than BrainTap, but I'm going to be showing people how to move from fear to power and basically how to use the brain outside of BrainTap but we're just going to show you some tricks and tips to really activate the brain to take it to another level so that you're not, as some people say, you're more in control. The 4-hour sessions at the biohacking event that's happening in June, if you go to, it's a 9th annual biohacking event with Dave Asprey, and Kesef and we're doing the pre-conference workshop. There's going to be about 800 people there, and it's close to being full. But I think if you get on there, they said they would even open it up a little bit more because I told them we were doing this event. So there could be some more tickets available there.
That's going to be a phenomenal event. So there's the biohacking conference. It's in Orlando in June. And they added an extra day for Dr. Porter and I to do this presentation, which is going to be incredible. If anyone's planning on attending, make sure you come a day early for the conference. There's a few more questions here. There's a lot more questions, but we'll try and get a few of them. We have a few minutes left. Are there plans to coordinate? Yeah, for sure. We have to do that. There'll be the day has to come where one platform and you see DNA and BrainTap and also other things interconnected. And in fact, there are companies that are building platforms like that. So it may not actually come from us. It may come outside, Claudia. Oh, hey, Claudia, how are you doing? Good to see you. So dementia reversal. Yeah, so we do see dementia reversal. Again, the more advanced, the harder the likelihood. So it's a bit of a gray area in terms of how advanced can we actually heal and fix. But certainly we've seen over and over again reversal and at least stopping the progression and then reversal depending on how far back they are or how far advanced they are, I should say. Sorry. Let me see a couple more questions here. So someone got in an accident. Yeah, so if you got, so Kelly, we did do a new panel, which does require retesting. And that's why the team told you that. So we've only ever once changed the panel, and that was a year and a half ago or so. So to access the new data, we do need to retest. It's not the full price, but it's just basically whatever the lab costs are. But I think there's definitely valuable information there in terms of, injuries. But even the original report has a lot of methylation and brain stuff in it. So that should be helpful. Let's see.
Somebody was asking about neurofeedback, and my background is I'm the Dean of Brain-Based Medicine at Quantum University, and I teach people to do neurofeedback. But most neurofeedback technicians, including the Cybernaut Institute and all those people, they don't give you a take-home program. Well, BrainTap is the take-home program. If you needed help with alpha, we have over 600 sessions that are specific to brainwaves. Even gamma, we've had people had a psilocybin experiences without a psilocybin because we mapped the brain for gamma. And we find that gamma produces a lot of GABA, which is a precursor to DMT. So you might have one of those spiritual experiences like you'd have with, but the main thing it does when you're in gamma is it breaks down that amyloid plaque that you were talking about earlier in the brain. So if you have a propensity for amyloid plaque buildup, you'd want to be doing some gamma training to break that down. I usually do gamma. That's the one that I use in my sauna every morning. I do a 33-minute gamma, and there's 10 of them. So every day I do a different one so that my body is never, 10 days later, I'm doing the one that I did before, but it's always a little bit different. And then I do a 10-minute SMR program when I'm doing my In Harmony acoustic mat that I sit on when I do my 10-minute meditation. So there's, I probably spend more time than most would want to. I spend 2 hours on myself every morning, but I get up early to do that.
So are you saying you use the BrainTap in the sauna?
Yes.
Oh,
I'm
cool.
using, this is the one that I use at home. When I'm at the office, I have a sunlight sauna. I don't use it inside that. This is called a relaxed sauna that your head's poking out.
Right,
We use the ones when if you've had a traumatic brain injury, a lot of people don't want you to use the saunas where your head gets hot. So we got the relaxed saunas. We got 2 of them. So when we're working with traumatic brain injuries, we're still getting the body to have that experience, but the brain's out, and then they can wear the BrainTap with it.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, let's see. How do you differ from Muse? I've heard that question a lot.
Well, the biggest thing, Muse will tell you what's happening in the brain, and they do have their meditations, but we actually have an algorithm that trains you. I know 100% of the time, every person who does a BrainTap session, where their brain's at any time, because I encoded the session. I used to have, when we do live sessions, I'm not going to do it because we only have 2 hours, but when I'm doing a 5-day training, we'll actually put somebody on the machine and I'll tell them where their brain's going to be. And I can put anybody I want in that chair, because it's almost like a beat music. It's like your brain follows the music and will go into those frequencies. And the brain loves to go through these frequencies. It's not like it's foreign to it. It just doesn't know how to do it because it's waiting for the environment to do it. Like sitting next to the ocean will produce alpha waves. So we're doing the same thing. So it's more about training the brain, getting it to do what it's supposed to be doing. So it's normal for the brain to do these things. In other words, that's what I'm saying. We're not getting the brain to do like lifting weights is not normal. People didn't, cavemen didn't go, let's put together our barbells and do our workout today. They got their workout just surviving, so we started that, in the 70s and 80s.
So I keep seeing this question coming up, so I'm going to answer it for everybody, which is, how do I know if I have the old reports or the new reports? The new reports are 6 reports, in fact, 7 now. So cardiovascular, mood and behavior, diet, sleep. So if they look like that, 6 reports, some of them are PDF, some of them are in a portal, then you have the new ones. If you have 2 reports, which were called the hormone pulse and the genome pulse, then you have the old data with the old reports, and there's some new genes to be tested. Some of you may even have an old singular report called Nutrients, which is our supplement brand. So that single report or the 2 reports, hormone pulse and genome pulse, are the old. The new is 6 to 7 reports, which is either digital or these big PDFs. So it's called the DNA 360. So if you don't have that and you have 2 or 1, then you have the old reports. Okay, aluminum in the brain. Oh, Laura's here. Hey, Laura, how are you doing? Yes, for sure. So she's answering somebody's question. Is there a chart in BrainTap that says what works best for different issues? So I know there's the app where you can scroll through and pick different programs, right? I guess what they're saying is like a quick reference guide.
We are, one of the things to do that, we have to file with the FDA because we're considered now a digital drug. So we are working on that, but if you put in almost any symptom, you'll see solutions come up. And we do have, because when people say, will it help with heavy metal release? Somebody just asked, when you're detoxing the brain by sleeping deeply, that's the best thing you can do to release heavy metals, is get your sleep back where it needs to be, because those pathways of detox only open up during deep level 4 sleep. So we don't actually, it's kind of hard because we can't claim we fix anything until the FDA says we do, because the medical community owns the word cure. So, but what we do is we put you in the right physiological state where your body can do what it's designed to do. So your body's designed to clear out those toxins. Even mold, what happens though is the brain gets used to the mold and thinks there's no problem. So that's why a lot of people living with mold, they go, if it's so bad, why am I still living here? Well, the brain thinks you didn't think it was worth leaving. So you just living there. It's like living next to a paper mill. You get your body, your nervous system gets used to it.
Yeah. And when it comes to detoxing, we tend to get specific for each individual on how to do it. It's not there are one size fits all answers, great, but if you get specific, you just have so much of a better time, especially when it comes to women and things like menopause. So for example, a lot of heavy metals actually get stored in your bone. And women, when they enter menopause, lose bone density. And when you end up having heavy metals leach back into the bloodstream that were not there. And you were wondering, like, where did this all come from? So, and then you start to solve the wrong problem. What's my exposure? What's my exposure? You weren't exposed. You were storing it. You just put it back into the blood. So when it comes to heavy metal detox or any kind of detox, mold, whatever, we just try and get very specific for each individual, as opposed to here's a general answer. That's where you get stuck in the trial and error. And one of the answers is, having physiology aligned and your brain aligned and ready to detox, right? And that's where tools like this are also awesome.
Somebody was asking too about, we have over 600 sessions that have no voice, so you can do your own meditations with it. The problem is most people need to change their negative voice. So when we've measured people who meditate, believe it or not, we've only had a handful of people in the history of time that we've measured with EEG that actually are getting the response they think they're getting when they meditate. Even in India, when we went to India, we did a series of people that were meditating for 10, 15 years, and they were stressing out their brain. They weren't relaxing their brain. They knew they needed to meditate because they were stressing, but they actually stressed themselves out more because when you close your eyes, by the way, without using light to keep it, the retinal flashing is actually keeping the brain awake. When you close your eyes, you shut down almost 1/3 of the brain because it's processing visual information. And if the brain can shut down and restore, it's going to do that. So the minute you close your eyes, you're shutting down those pathways that need to be retrained.
Somebody's asking about this 40% off. Was that for the conference or was that for the?
That was for the conference. But if they go to, if they use your link to buy, they're going to get the equivalency of more than 40% off because we've combined a package that they get with your link to buy BrainTap.
Oh, okay. So
we'll get the 1 year, instead of paying $1,007 for the whole program, I think it's only $797 or something like that. So they get that off.
We're going to share that with everyone by email after. So everyone here is going to get the replay anyway, and then we'll have all those notes in there. Oh, Dara. So Dara is visiting us from Israel, by the way. She has a really cool podcast out there. So lymph system, same thing. You have to be specific. There's the lymphatic system, and there's also the glymphatic, drainage of the brain, which happens in your sleep. And so we have to be specific once again. There's a lot of things you can do, from like physical manual drainage to supplementation. Then there's actually knowing the biology of, like, okay, I start draining this stuff. Where does it go? Is there an exit? And having that exit prepared. There's, a clinician I was talking to yesterday that has a protocol that she calls pre-tox. Before you detox, you have to get the body ready to exit everything and get it and clear it. So there's a lot of stuff you can do in terms of lymph removal and lymph clearance. I would just say that you get the body ready for it first. Otherwise, where does it go? ADHD and genetics, huge. Genetically, I am supposed to have ADHD and I don't, right? So what does it mean? There's a couple, the dopamine pathway, seeking reward, right? Constantly being prompted by the next stimulus, serotonin dysregulation, everything gets my attention. I always am looking for the next thing to draw attention to, and high comped activity, fast clearance of neurochemicals. So I'm constantly moving on to the next thing. So any one of those things, a child sitting in a classroom could express behavior that looks like ADHD. The same exact things that could be called ADHD are also that child's superpower. I seek reward. I see every detail. I can move quick and think quick and just give me the tidbits, and I can use that information. So again, it's a lot of that is contextual. There's also the gut. So how well you're doing in the gut, and how that gut brain vagus nerve connection can lead to behavioral issues. So, but that's also a great area where, again, if you have somebody that you're kind of acutely trying to deal with while you holistically unwind all of their bad habits, which takes time, that's again where you can incorporate something like BrainTap and get them feeling good quickly while you unpack all the bad habits and make them, be in the state they're supposed to be. Okay, so there's yeah, somebody else just asked about ADHD. Is there a link between what's discussed with maybe the pairing of TPH? So not really. So somebody said TPH and BDNF. So when you have the optimal TPH, there's a phenomenon called epistasis, which turns the BDNF off. So all we're saying is that you would have the suboptimal BDNF more in terms of your mood, not so much in terms of the neuroplasticity. So it's more of a trigger if your BDNF itself is off. That's what you have to look for. Okay, what else do we have here? We have 1 minute left. I didn't realize that.
I'm going to put into the link too. Somebody's asking about brainwaves and different things. I'm going to put a copy that you can put in the email there. They can download the PDF of my book, Thrive and Overdrive. It's the full book. They can just download it and get it answers a lot of questions we don't have time to answer. And it will teach you about it. So you can download that book, just read it in your reader. If you have a Kindle reader or an iBook reader, should work just like a book. So you can use that, and it'll explain some of the things we didn't get to answer here today. And it talks about brain waves and what we can do about stress and things of that nature, because stress drives a lot of these things we're talking about to the negative. We want to, because once you're in stress, you become a survivor instead of a thriver, and we want your nervous system to be thriving. So
we're going to rapid fire a couple of things here. There's no extra charge for the pre-day. Someone's saying if I'm at Dave's conference, would I have to pay for the extra? There's no extra charge if you have the ticket. The Dropbox links are there to get the book, which is amazing. Our book is at thednaway.com. So go to thednaway.com. And our book actually just launched last week, which is really exciting. We work with Hay House, a publisher that saw value in what we do and said the world needs to know. So the book just came out. It'll tell the story of all the systems in the body and how to make it easy to, get yourself healthy. There was a link here. Somebody asked, it takes me to the DNA page. So the link that we had put in for the DNAcompany.com/BrainTap is for a discount on the DNA test for anyone that's here today. That's for a discount on the DNA test. For the BrainTap promo, if anybody wants to get that set up, look out for the email that's coming. And there was the annual subscription. There's going to be a discount there that will come in the email right after this. So thank you, everyone. Oh, one last quick one. What's the difference between what we do in 23andMe? 23andMe is you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. What we do is here's why and what to do about it. Genetics versus functional genomics. Doctor is you have psoriasis, go get this cream. Functional medicine is why did you get psoriasis? Right? The root cause. That's the difference. All right, guys. All the links, like we just said, they'll be in the replay. So take a look for that email. It will all be there. We'll keep the links open for a few days so that you guys can access them. Thanks again for attending and have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you in a few weeks here.
We'll see you soon. Yeah.